December 2nd, 2024. This is episode 71 of the In a Nutshell podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells, and as usual, I'm joined by Joe Meade. Tonight, Joe and I will take you through a couple teams' feast weeks and how they're feeling coming into a Big Ten play here. Joe is starting soon. Now, a bunch of the MTEs we did do separate videos on, so if you didn't hear from your team, you can go check those out. We also will talk about a couple of them here because, either Joe wasn't on it or there's more to say. But, Joe, we are going to start with the team that might be looking the best in the conference right now, and that is the Oregon Ducks. They win the Players Era Festival in Las Vegas, and now there is a video coming out on that later in the channel, the whole MTE and the other teams in there. But, Joe, right now we're just talking about the Ducks. Oregon sports in general are looking really good as they head into year one of the Big Ten here. Oregon is the only undefeated team left in football, and their basketball team is 8-0. A couple of shaky bye game wins, but, Joe, they knock off three really good basketball teams here in the Players Era Festival. They beat Buzz Williams and Texas A&M by 10. They beat San Diego State by 10, and then they beat Alabama by 2. But, Joe, Oregon has to be the surprise of the conference so far this season.
Absolutely, Sean. And they're doing it. It's a theme I've been saying. I think they're finding multiple ways to win. That's not to say they lack an identity. I think, to an extent, we've said that about Michigan and Michigan State in their slight critiques because both of them have done really well to this point. But you could name three guys that stand out. I think mine are T.J. Bamba, Jackson Shellstad, and Nate Biddle. And Nate Biddle, a lot of people criticized him because of the high status recruit he was. Probably was thought to be a one and done at times while he was in high school, or even a two and done. This is his fourth year, but I think he's putting it together, Sean. I think Biddle, the combo of Biddle, Shellstad, and Bamba, whether that's them shooting, whether that's Biddle going down low, stretching the floor to Brandon Angel as well. This is a team that's going to be really hard to beat, and I don't think this should have been a surprise to a lot of people. Admittedly, it was a bit of one to me. I thought Oregon was going to be a top half team in this conference, or at very worst, the middle class, because Dana Altman's a heck of a coach. I think he's one of the more underrated or under the radar coaches in this country. You'll hear him speculating for bigger jobs, but I don't think that really means much. Oregon's consistently been in March Madness. They've famously got on some pretty good runs as well. So, really good for the Ducks. And Sean, in terms of teams like sleepwalking, like that should be ranked or should be higher ranked or should get more recognition, if Oregon isn't the number one team that fits that broad category I just made up off the top of my head for this podcast, I don't know who in this conference would be, to be quite honest with you.
And, Joe, they have come all the way up from unranked to number 12 in the country. Very rare to see a team do that. Obviously easier in MTE week, because you have more games than a normal week. But I am not surprised that they're playing good basketball. I think we both thought they were tournament teams. But Shellstad being their fifth leading scorer and them still winning is surprising to me. Now, I don't expect that to continue. I expect him to at least get to third. He's 0.1. He's 0.2 or 0.3 away from being third. I expect him to get to third and be a really good guard in this conference, but I think there's more in the tank for him. He's shooting just 34% from the field, 25% from three. He's going to do better than that. So if they're winning already, they're a scary team. That Big Ten teams, Joe, have never seen Dana Altman before, or, it was an NCAA tournament game or a non-conference game. We have seen teams or coaches come into the conference that haven't been here before and have success initially, whether it's Kevin Willard or even Mike Woodson to a degree, really anybody. And I could see Dana Altman really, really doing a good job in that department. Off the top of your head, Joe, he's got to be in the top 2 or 3 coaches in this league based on what he's done over there. He's been at Oregon for a while, and they've had a lot of success.
Yeah, I think aside from perhaps a Matt Painter or a Tom Izzo,
those are the two.
Those are the only two you can throw accolades with. I think recently maybe an Underwood or maybe a Painter, Underwood, Izzo. Yeah, aside from that, I think Musselman's an impressive coach, but I don't think he has the resume quite yet of a Dana Altman.
But Joe, they do start off their Big Ten basketball journey by going to the schools that came with them from the Pac-12. They're headed down to LA on Wednesday to play USC at the Galen Center, and then they're headed back up home to where they will host UCLA. So a chance to get some Big Ten wins without playing a team that was in the Big Ten last year. Then they have Stephen F. Austin and then Stanford on a neutral before hosting Weber State, and then they get into it with Illinois, Maryland, Oregon, or Ohio State, and so on. But Joe, we will do a Big Ten Power Rankings episode, our second one of the year for basketball later in the week. And not to spoil anything like that, but Joe, they're going to be near the top, significantly higher than we had them last month.
Yeah, barring something that happens in a Tuesday night game, and there's very few. Yeah, it's going to be really hard for a lot of teams to overpass them, barring, like, for example, Michigan blowing out of Wisconsin, or Wisconsin vice versa doing the same to Michigan. So,
All right, Joe. Well, the only other team that is undefeated is a team that we did recap their MTE where they looked impressive, but we do, it's been a while, so we're going to go back and talk to them again. That's Wisconsin Badgers. John Donji leads the way with 22.9 points per game. They crushed Arizona. Turns out Arizona isn't that good, so maybe that win isn't as good as you hoped. But then you beat UCF and Pitt at the Greenbrier tip-off. And, Joe, we already talked about Wisconsin so far, so you can talk about them for a little bit, but I do want to preview what's up next for the Badgers.
yeah, I think ultimately, Sean, John Tonji's carrying the team. Not to say that he's AJ Storr per se in terms of.
Well, he's doing better than Storr did so far.
But I just want to see it consistently through a season. But I want to highlight John Blackwell, freshman to sophomore improvement. And people say I'm biased to John Blackwell because I saw him play in high school. Perhaps that's true. But perhaps I just also read the analytics and the stats, and he's gotten a lot better. And Klesmit hasn't had to play well in a lot of these games, like the UCF game and the Pittsburgh game in particular. He didn't do anything that really wowed me or wowed the average viewer. And for a fact he's going to get going again. So, yeah, this is a scary team, Sean. And I think limiting Taji is a possibility, completely containing him. I don't think a team's going to quite figure that out. Perhaps, one of these older time coaches like Izzo, or Altman might do so. But aside from those three, I don't see them slowing him down much, and I don't see how you could stop everyone, whether that's Blackwell, Klesmit, or even some of these bench guys, or Nolan Winter, Steven Crow. I mean, these are guys that have been in the program, guys that know what they're doing, and even though depth was a concern, I don't think it's come back to bite them yet. I do think at some point they're going to have to address that, but as of now, 8-0 and number 11 in the country.
Yeah, I don't think we've ever really seen a Wisconsin offense, Joe, look this efficient. And that could just be a little bit of, maybe they won't score at the rate that they're scoring. And I don't think they really have to. We'd be shocked if they keep up this rate. But so far there's a clear path to how they want to win games. John Tonji's been living at the free throw line. He's 94.5%. Joe, and he's already taken 73 attempts. We'll see how Big Ten teams can scheme around that, how the officials in the conference will referee him, but that's a pretty good safety net to have, to get your 95% shooter to the free throw line. I mean, he's had some 20 free throw attempt games. That is certainly something that maybe to this level isn't sustainable, but this Wisconsin offense is as good as it's ever looked, even going back to some of the Bo Ryan days.
Yeah, Sean, and now a modern version of that, which I think a lot of people criticize Greg Gard about, or critique Greg Gard about, particularly in 22-23 and certainly last year, even though I thought they had an ultimately good year that was marred by the early tournament exit to James Madison. But I do think he's up there right now for early coach of the year now. We don't need to debate that now because we highlighted one before, and there's certainly others we could go into. But it's impossible to say he hasn't done a heck of a job so far, particularly with the expectations they had coming into the year.
Yeah, and Joe, I do think there were some. It wasn't a done deal that they were going to keep him after last year. It's been a couple of tough years in a row, plus how last year kind of fell off the rails. They ultimately did. We're not sure how close they were to pulling the trigger, but he is back, and they look really good. Now, Joe, they do have four really tough games coming up. I mean, really tough. They host Michigan, a team that we did talk about in the Fort Myers tip-off video. We can talk a little bit about them here, but those are two teams that look pretty good so far. But at home, Joe, with how good Wisconsin's been and with how many turnovers Michigan's been having, you would think Wisconsin should win this game. They are favored by 3.5, so pretty close, all things considered. But that is tomorrow night at the time of this recording. So, Joe, let's preview this one a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, Sean, I think ultimately it's pretty simple for Michigan. I think in transition, they need to get this game there a lot because Michigan struggled with turnovers, but it's been in the half-court sets. It's been the more organized offensive possession, something Dusty May at his presser today indicated. He's really happy with the team in transition. I think he's really happy with the state of their scoring, their offense. They can do it through Roddy Gale. They can do it through Wolf, through Golden now. And even guys off the bench, whether that's Sam Walters or a Will Cheddar. I think the one thing that could really hurt them in this game is their lack of defensive rebounding, which for a top 6 height-wise team in the country, that's pretty disappointing. He did not make any if, ands, or buts about it. That's a disappointing aspect of a game to be struggling with this lineup. I do think if that continues in this game, that's an underrated factor. Giving this Wisconsin team extra possessions at home, particularly if they have like a 5-point lead and they have a longer possession and, a 5-point lead that turns into an 8-point lead in a Kohl Center crowd. For some of our newer listeners, maybe if you're on the West Coast and you haven't seen a lot of games at the Kohl Center, Sean knows and I know, 6-point swings at the Kohl Center are like 12-point swings. And that arena is a house of horrors for Michigan. It's certainly one for Sean's Hoosiers. I don't have to tell you all about that. And aside from the team itself, that's also a big aspect. So yeah, Sean, if I have to give you a prediction before I give you the floor, I do think Wisconsin wins this game in a very competitive, like 67-61 kind of game. I do think the defenses are going to do very well in this game. I think that'll be emphasized. I think that's going to be the biggest part of both guard and Dusty May's game plan. So believe it or not, I'm going to go with the lower scoring victory for the Badgers. And I do think they're going to have to make adjustments, but ultimately their home crowd spurs them on and they come out with a 6-point victory.
I actually think it'll be very high scoring, Joe. I think both coaches are going to be okay with kind of running. The way Wisconsin ran with Arizona was not something that I've ever seen from them at all. I mean, they were up and down the floor. I think we see sort of a John Tanji close where he gets to the hoop and he really closes this game with some free throws and layups. And I think it'll be neck and neck the whole way. These are two teams that are playing really well right now, and it's a good opportunity for both of them to continue that. But, Joe, the next three in this stretch for Wisconsin, which hopefully we'll preview later, is they go on the road to their in-state rivals, number 5 Marquette at the Fiserv Forum. That'll be a good one. Marquette looks awesome so far. Then they go on the road to Big Ten foes Illinois, who also look really good so far, and we'll get to them in a little bit. And then they go on the road to the Gainbridge Fieldhouse in Indianapolis to play Butler, another team that looks good so far. So, Joe, Wisconsin is going to have to continue to play well to win really any of these 4 games, and you'd expect them to not get through these 4 undefeated. But right now, with how the Badgers have been playing, you'd expect better than 2-2, but at the end of these 4, if you're a Badgers fan, and I can tell you that you're going to get 2 of these, do you take that?
I think so, Sean, and I know we're going to transition into Michigan's upcoming schedule next. I think it's a similar theme for both teams, particularly Wisconsin. I mean, 2 road games against top 5, the 2 top 10 teams. I think Illinois is ultimately a top 10 team. I'm not going to let the 19th ranking right now fool me. That's going to be really hard to do. So I think in the most logical way, they beat Michigan, they win the game at Cambridge against Butler. And if you could steal one against Marquette or Illinois, you'd have to be ecstatic. But even 2-2, I don't think Michigan will be a quad 1 win per se.
At home, probably not.
Yeah, just because I don't know if they'll finish 1-30. But I will tell you, the game at Butler, I do think, based on what I've seen of Butler, they're not going to finish out of the top 75. So getting a quad 1 win, probably a quad 2 win against Michigan, when it comes to seeding in the tournament, that's not going to be hurtful at all.
Yeah, I think this Butler one is one that they're probably going to be favored in, and I actually think Butler is going to win this. They have one loss to Austin P at home in a bye game early on where they were missing a couple players and they had another player get injured in that game. But Butler's been awesome since then. Now, this isn't a Big East show, but they beat Northwestern, they beat Mississippi State in their MTE. So I think Wisconsin is going to go into the other two, Joe, on the road as underdogs. Kind of maybe let's try and get one of these two. And then I do think that Butler game might be a little tougher than people think in an NBA arena that will primarily be filled with the opponent's fans. So really, really important sort of not even 2 weeks, Joe. These 4 games are in the next 12 days. So it's great if you're playing well, which they are, but if something comes up, a hole arises, they're not going to have much time to fix that. But, Joe, Michigan is another team that we did talk about a lot in our Fort Myers tip-off recap. They look good in that. They have the win against TCU, the loss against Wake Forest, and then a pretty tough next 4 games for your Wolverines also, Joe. They have the away game at Wisconsin, the home game against Iowa, Arkansas on a neutral, and Oklahoma on a neutral. Now, Arkansas doesn't look as good as people thought they were, but Oklahoma is the exact opposite. They win the battle for Atlantis. So, Joe, a pretty important 4-game stretch here for your Wolverines.
Yeah, Sean, I'm going to be blatantly clear. I think Wisconsin, you have some gray area between a 2-2 and a 3-1. I think a 2-2 for Michigan's outstanding, especially because 3 of these games are away from the Chrysler Center. I do think that Iowa game is sneaky tough, depending on, I'll make a bold claim. Peyton Sanford won't go 1 for 14 from 3 like he did against Nevada in Iowa's lone loss. I am pretty comfortable saying that, or I'm reverse jinxing in a good way, so I'm happy with it either way. But Iowa's offense always gives any team fits. I do think that game they have against Northwestern also tomorrow night on Peacock, I do think that can get them into a rhythm. And that's not really a good thing before you play an Iowa team. Previewing the Wisconsin game, I already gave you my take that I think Michigan will lose that game. I do think they take care of Iowa and Arkansas. I think that game against Oklahoma will be an awesome game. 9 p.m. Wednesday game on ESPN2. I don't know how it's on that, but Porter Moser versus Dusty May, that's a great coaching matchup, and especially because they'll have 8 days to prep for that. I do think that'll be a really competitive game, and I'm going to be a coward because I know we're going to do a cast between these next 16 days where I can make a full prediction for that when I do see more of Oklahoma and whatnot. But all I can say is I'd be shocked if that's not an entertaining basketball game start to finish.
Yeah, Joe, the Battle for Atlantis video is yet to be recorded, and we'll talk a lot about Oklahoma there. But I think Michigan probably does lose at the Kohl Center, and I think they should win the other 3. A lot of Oklahoma's success, I think, was sort of like conference tournament, get to a place, stay in one place, play well in that place sort of thing. I don't know if they're really the 21st best team in the country. They didn't have to play Gonzaga, Indiana, or Louisville. Oh, no, sorry, they beat Louisville in the championship. They didn't have to play Gonzaga or Indiana in the Battle for Atlantis. They got to play Providence, who came in 8th place. Arizona was their second round matchup, and then Louisville. So I think they did avoid a couple of the damaging teams there in Atlantis. So I think that is one where on a neutral floor with how good Gonzaga's looked, that's probably going to be a quad 1. I think there's a lot of issues around Arkansas, and we'll use that as a transition into our next point. But Joe, I think you have to beat Iowa at home, and if you do, then you can excuse a Kohl Center loss to being a good team on the road, and then you go into those 2 neutral games off of a victory. I think that's the pathway here through December that Dusty May and his staff are looking at. If we can get this Iowa game, that'll be a springboard into these next 2 neutral court games, which I think you're better than both those teams.
Yeah, and one last thing, Sean, we have to move on. If they do beat Wisconsin tomorrow at the Kohl Center, I guess all bets are off. That expecting 4-0 following a Kohl Center, hypothetical Kohl Center victory is not unreasonable, because winning there is, you have to be a heck of a team to win there when Wisconsin is good, which by all accounts they are.
And Joe, that Arkansas game is at Madison Square Garden on December 10th. They just played another Big Ten team, which I will use that transition On Thanksgiving, they went to Kansas City, Missouri to play Brad Underwood in the Fighting Illini, the Visich Bowl. And Illinois absolutely dismantled Calipari and the Razorbacks. They win 90-77. This game was really in the 15 to 20 range for the entirety of the second half. Illinois' offense looks awesome. They have multiple threats. They can all shoot it. And Arkansas did not change their ball screen defense, and Brad Underwood said, all right, we'll just continue to do the same thing over and over again. And it only ended up being 13, Joe, but Illinois cruises to a neutral court victory.
Sean, shooting practically 50% from three is unbelievable. And I know some people are going to say, a bit of a home crowd for Illinois and whatnot. That does not matter at all. Anyone who watched this game or anyone who watched even clips of this game understood that Illinois dominated start to finish. And, Kylan Boswell, 18, Yukonis, 23, Avicic, 21. I mean, Yukonis has got to be he's got to be a leader for freshman of the year, right? At this stage, it's hard. I'd be hard pressed to find someone.
There's a lot of good ones.
There's a lot of good ones, but at least he's mine because I was biased and picked him. But he's showing why. When he's not shooting threes, he could get to the basket. He could create for his teammates as well. Getting 4 assists. I mean, the guy's a complete problem. Also, not necessarily lazy on the boards either. So this is a problem for the conference.
Yeah, he's gonna have some triple doubles this year.
1,000%, Sean. Brad Underwood teams consistently get better into March. This team's playing like a top 10 team in the country, in my opinion. I don't think that's a far-fetched thing to say. Perhaps that's my Big Ten goggles on. But having Big Ten goggles on also means I know Brad Underwood's a heck of a coach. And I think excusing the one loss to Bama where, they got 100 piece, they also put up 87 in that game. So it's not like they were lazy after a really bad first half. So I don't know, Sean. The team has the conference has so many damn good teams that predicting a winner, like right now, if I had to predict a new one, I did pick UCLA to be very clear at the beginning of the year, seems impossible because there's so many hot teams and there's so many damn good coaches that it's an exciting time for the conference, but it also tells me that, Brad Underwood, as good as a coach as he's been the last 2 years, he's going to have to step it up even more due to the standard getting higher and higher. I do think that will raise his game a lot more. And let's face it, Sean, this is an elite talent developer and elite talent finder.
Yeah, and he is, you hear a lot of noise out of training camp and not training camp, but media day and coaches talking about their teams. And Brad Underwood did kind of slip one in there that he said that this was the most talented group that he's ever had, which you'd be like, well, you had Io and Kofi on the same team and Curbelo and all those guys. And, he said that this was the most talented team, and you can certainly see why. Offensively, Joe, this team is going to be a problem. It seems like they have an answer for every sort of ball screen defense, with Kisparis being the creator. Ivicic could short roll, he could pop, he could roll. And then you have Humreckhouse in the corner, Trey White, Kylan Boswell, Will Riley. I mean, there are a lot of pieces here. Whereas Johnson can give you some good minutes at the 5. Offensively, I think they're going to win a lot of games. They might win a lot of games by blowout fashion because they can really score it. Now, the defensive issues are still there, I think. That's why they lost the Alabama game. They could not stop a straight line drive. But Arkansas did some good things offensively here, Joe, and it didn't really matter. I think Illinois is going to win a lot of games by just outscoring their opponents this year, and if they can guard just a little bit, they're going to finish near the top of this league.
Yeah, that's funny because that's going to be a theme of a team we're going to talk about pretty soon here, Sean.
All right, well, Joe, we do have time for just one more. Now, obviously, there's 18 teams in the league this year, so we're going to try and get as many videos out as we can, but it's a lot of teams to cover in our 30-minute window here. But, Joe, we are going to go to the negative side here. It's the Indiana Hoosiers going down to the battle for Atlantis. They leave with just one win. They did lose handily to Louisville on the opening game of the tournament. Then, due to an upset in the other game, they got Gonzaga in the losers bracket. That game wasn't particularly close either. And then it's Providence who they play on day 3, and Indiana did take care of business there. But considering Providence was, their game the day before was done at like 10 p.m. and they had to get out there and play at 11 the next day, that's certainly not fair. But Joe, from the outside point of view, disastrous trip for the Hoosiers down to Nassau.
Yeah, Sean, and let's face it, the Providence game, while it was dominant, I mean, they probably could have won that game by 30. It was against a team that looked hopeless, that team that got blown out by Davidson the night before. Yeah, Sean, I'm not going to lie. I thought losing to Louisville was definitely on the table. I mean, MTE's first games are extremely challenging, especially knowing you're going to have to pace yourself in a way. The fact Chucky Hepburn looked like an All-American, and then, they got beaten so many different ways in that game. I can't imagine how frustrating it was to be a Hoosier fan. The first half you could chalk up to, yeah, it was bad. They'll make adjustments. Clearly, the only adjustments being made were in Pat Kelsey's locker room. Definitely not in Mike Woodson's, or at least not the good ones. I'm pretty mystified by Indiana's lack of offense, lack of anything really. And the 7 of 20 from 3 isn't really the pressing part. The 23 turnovers, I mean, that's stuff we've seen out of Michigan of late. And it makes sense for Michigan. And I know these are two new teams, but to have that pop up at this point in the season, it's really discouraging, because if it happens at the very beginning, it's fixable. But now that you have it against these really good teams, aside from Sam Houston State, it's not going to get that much easier for Indiana, to be completely honest with you, Sean. I know they have Sam Houston, Miami, Ohio, Minnesota. From then on in January, you're going to have a lot of problems if this continues. But, Sean, I want to give you the complete entire floor after my little tangent there.
Yeah, the first half, I think Louisville's honestly a little lucky to be up 8. Indiana missed a couple really easy looks, and you just thought, all right, if that sort of half happens again, then this will probably be a close game. And I think Pat Kelsey also thought that, because they came out of the locker room, possessed. They were turning it over. They were beating Indiana up and down the floor. It looked like a team playing on 14 hours of sleep versus a team playing on 4 hours of sleep. And there's more to that if you want to get really into the weeds. There's some distracting things down there in Atlantis. It's a fun place, but Louisville is a fun team to watch, and I don't think any of us really thought that Indiana was definitely going to win this game. We thought that they should, and I still think they should have. But the margin of victory, I mean, this has happened way too many times under Mike Woodson at Indiana. A team that just totally gives up and withers when things start to get tough. This was alarming, Joe, and they didn't get any favors by having to play one of the best teams in the country the next day. And a lot of people will look at this one and say that it was more of the same. I do think to some degree they did lose to Gonzaga by 16, but I do think the effort was a little better here. It just turned into fouls rather than good defense. And like 80% good effort will get you into position, and then you'll be late, so you'll foul. And Gonzaga, the way that they run their offense is so fluid and sharp that if you try and bump them off their spots and it gets called, I mean, you're not going to stop them. And Gonzaga's also coming off of a loss the day before, so they were fired up. I don't really think that Indiana played awful in this game. It's just they didn't quite get the stops that they needed, and then Gonzaga gets hot. They're playing off a loss, and this is how this sort of game happens. Offensively, this game was a lot better, 73 points against a good team. But Joe, Indiana heads into day 3, facing 8th place, or staring 8th place right in the face here. They do take care of business with Providence. Still a ton of defensive issues, but turns out Providence, tired, don't make as many shots. And then Indiana did. Mackenzie Mbako, 25. Galloway with 18, 5 and 5. Indiana does salvage at least one game out of here, but I think the shots will come and go. They kind of always have under Woodson at Indiana. They'll go inside. You have enough players who are capable of scoring 20. That's a positive here. 4 different players had more than 15. 3 had 20 in one of these 3 games. But the defensive issues are something that is a worry for me. Too many easy looks. For a team of this size, giving up this many offensive rebounds and this many easy layups really shouldn't happen.
Yeah, Sean, and that's something Indiana would have to trademark itself on. I mean, that's been the trademark the last 2 years. I think it's been defensive effort and defensive prowess. And if they don't have that, it doesn't matter how good their offense will be at times in this conference. It's really disappointing. Sean, I do want to end with this one question to you, at least on my front. Do you think Indiana has to start worrying overall about tournament status, or is it way too early for that?
I think you got to take it one game at a time. You got to play Gonzaga, and you lost, but the strength of schedule numbers will reflect that way. And then, you just got to hope that Bryce Hopkins comes back for Providence and they start to win some games. The Big East stinks. There's a way that Providence could win 11, 12 games in the Big East and be maybe not a tournament team, but an all right team. And it's a neutral, so they only have to get their 50th for this to be quad one. But there is a way that can turn out. But in terms of quality wins, Joe, you're just going to have to get them in the conference. Other teams have done it. The Big 12 teams have done it for years. Like we said earlier, there is enough good teams where if you get 2 or 3 or 4 of them, there is a way there. And the talent of this team will be able to win them enough games to at least get them in the conversation, I think. And if you play Purdue twice, if you can get them, you play Illinois, you play Oregon, you play Wisconsin. I don't think so yet. I think it's one game at a time. Figure something out defensively so that Umar Ballo does not get switched onto the one. It happened like 12 times in that Louisville game. And Chucky Hepburn, I mean, he's way faster than most guards, let alone forwards. So I think you got to take a step back and say, all right, we're still 5-2. We still have 2 bye games before perhaps the worst team in the Big Ten at home, and then a Nebraska team on the road who is not supposed to finish in the top half, and then 2 more bye games. So even the most optimistic of fans, you probably don't play your next 7 games against a tournament team. So there's wins in there. There's things to figure out. This team is better than last year. It is deeper. There are some contributors off the bench. But, Joe, this team that was headed towards a top 3 Big Ten finish and a protected seed is now not.
Yeah. That's all I have to say. Just that.
But, yep, well, Joe, we're at the half an hour mark here, so we are going to wrap it up. Be sure to check out the other videos here on the channel. We've got the football recaps coming out. We've got our Big Ten championship preview coming out soon, our Big Ten basketball power rankings. Football power rankings will be coming out within the next couple weeks as well. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.